Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari, Hari Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari, Hari Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari. Krishna. Usually it takes me a while to kind of process and re-examine conversations that took place or topics that were discussed. Not material topics, they come in and out, gone, but that have to do with Krishna conscious practice, Krishna conscious understanding, teachings, pastimes. So, for example, last night, and I'm going to do this every night before taking rest, read a chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So I started last night. It's not like I haven't read Bhagavad Gita. I've read Bhagavad Gita like, I don't know how many times. But each time, it becomes more and more wonderful. It doesn't get old. It's just ever new, ever fresh. Wonderful Bhagavad Gita. So I read the first chapter where Dhritarashtra is asking, what's going on the battlefield? What are my sons and the sons of Pandu up to? And then Sanjaya, through his mystic abilities given to him by Srila Vyasadeva, is able to view what's going on. So actually Bhagavad Gita, the whole Bhagavad Gita, is Sanjaya's account as empowered by Srila Vyasadeva. It's Sanjaya, actually speaking, Bhagavad Gita, as he's hearing and seeing what's going on, given this mystic ability by Srila Vyasadeva. So Sanjaya is speaking the Bhagavad Gita. He can hear Krishna, he can hear Arjuna, he can see what's going on the battlefield. So I read that before taking rest, and wouldn't you know it, I was dreaming about soldiers and Bhagavad Gita and battlefields and the position of women, because it's mentioned there, Arjuna's hesitant to fight because what will happen, hey Madhu, Hare Krishna, what will happen to all the women if I fight this battle and these, societies disrupted like that. So thinking all these things while sleeping, because I read this before, taking rest. So it's like that. Now, this morning I woke up with it, I'm thinking about the Bhagavad Gita and Krishna and like this. So I know a lot of times people are practicing Krishna consciousness, and they're also like watching lots of movies and different things like that. I know I've gone through that. So what will you be thinking of? You'll be thinking about what you saw and heard. Some movie. Lady Gaga. So everything's connected to Krishna, and so indirectly, but it's already indirect. Hare Krishna. Better to be thinking and hearing about Krishna directly. And then you're hearing and thinking about Krishna directly. There's so many distractions. The Maya is very, that's her service. And she's a good servant of Krishna. So there was that. Now, then I'm thinking and processing after reading Bhagavad Gita. It stays. It doesn't go. It stays. The same with the chanting, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I remember, as a young person, many millions of years ago, they were just learning how to do advertising on the media, radio. When I was there was no TV, it was radio. I would sit on the floor and watch the radio on Saturday mornings. But the radio, so they were learning how to advertise with little songs and jingles, which they've got it down now. Different ways to advertise, catchy to catch you. So there was an advertisement for chewing gum, and I can't get rid of it. I would hear that advertisement, and it would stay. I would just play and play and play. So, thinking of it now, here it comes. Who wants it? Go away. But it's like that. What we're exposed to, what we hear, what we see, stays with us, as well as what we experience, because that's a form of experiencing, hearing and seeing. It is a form of experiencing. So it stays with us, and we process it. It doesn't go, it stays. So better to hear chant about Krishna than watch movies. It's better if you want to make some progress in Krishna consciousness. It only makes sense. Yes? Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. So the chanting of Hare Krishna is also like a little jingle. It's not, it's Krishna himself, but it can stay. So you're practicing Hare Krishna, then you have to do some other thing during the day, some maintenance thing, you've got to go shopping, this, that, the other thing. It stays. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. And when the other little advertisements for this and that, the other thing come, there's no room because you've already got this other one. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is great protection, really. So something else that I was exposed to, and then later kind of going over it, what was that? How do I understand it? It was a group of devotees discussing in more or less informal way, but guided but informal. It wasn't like a classroom discussion. It was more just like a little meeting or a sangha. And different devotees were bringing up different questions that they had, things that they were dealing with, how to deal with. So one young devotee was in so much anxiety about how to protect his small child, given the atmosphere now everywhere, especially with all the video stuff and the way the school system is, and who the child will play with, and the kids are all contaminated with crazy stuff, and they don't, they pick up whatever they pick it up, whatever it is, and they imitate, and they pick up because they're learning, they don't know, so he's worried how to protect his child from associating and with these contaminating things. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Mostly, looking for practical things to do, like don't go over here on Sundays, and don't go over there on Saturday, and don't watch the TV, and do this other thing. It's mostly like looking for like to-do things, practical, like how to fix it things. That's all right. I have to make some effort. You do the needful. But the real thing is just to be yourself as the parents of the child, as Krishna conscious, as you possibly can. And they will get that from you. They will get it from the parents. So that when they do come in contact with these contaminating underlying sexual stuff and temptations for intoxicants and drugs and all these other things they come into contact with, it's completely running rampant through the Western societies and also the Indian societies everywhere. China, everywhere. It's the whole world. It's Kali Yuga. They will have this Krishna. They'll be strong. So someone brought up the reference to, his name's Nishinga Brahmachari. Shringa Brahmachari. I can't remember. It's from Mahabharata. There's a story there, a pastime, that the father was an ascetic. He lived with his son in the woods, and ever since the boy was born, the boy never saw anyone but his father as another human being, and was simply engaged in sacrificial performances and mantras, and so the father was thinking the boy was protected. Because he didn't come into contact with anything other than sacrificial performance and mantras, and the only other human being he ever saw was his father. So the father was thinking, I'm protecting my son. My son's protected. But the word got out to a king who was having trouble with drought in his kingdom. There was no rainfall. So in consultation with his advisors, his spiritual advisors, they informed him that the drought could be relieved by the mercy of a very, very pure, saintly, yogi, Hare Krishna. That drought could be relieved if he would get the mercy of a very, very austere brahmachari. So they found out that this father and his son were living in the forest, and that the son was extremely pure. So they made a plan to capture the son for the sake of the kingdom. They sent a prostitute, what else? And she disguised herself as another ascetic, like the father and the boy. But the boy had never met a woman before. He was a young man. He didn't even know what a woman was. Living in the forest his whole life just with his father and the squirrels and the chipmunks and the snakes and the whatever. He didn't know what a human woman was. He wasn't familiar. It's a funny story. So she approached him and made believe she was like him and that she had an ashram, and so immediately, instinctively became attracted because of her energy. It was Shakti. It was overwhelming because he's never met a woman before. This is almost pornographic, this pastime. He'd never met a woman before. And he disregarded his father because the attraction was so strong. She even hugged him and he was like gone to the moon, So he went with her, and she ended up tricking him and bringing him back to the kingdom. And their drought problem was solved, and the king arranged for a marriage with his princess daughter for this ascetic brahmachari, and he then became, part of the royal family. So someone referred to that when they were trying to understand how to protect their own child, and they were seeing it as a disaster, that the boy was diverted from his pure living in the forest. He was diverted. He fell down. They see it as fall down. But actually, it has a happy ending. It's a happy ending. The boy didn't fall down. He just had some service to do. He helped the whole kingdom. The drought was solved. He got a beautiful wife. They lived peacefully together. And then when it was time to renounce, they both went back to the forest to complete their path. So it wasn't a disaster. It's Krishna's arrangement, Krishna's plan. But in the meeting, it didn't get that far. The poor devotee who was struggling so much, how do I protect my child? He didn't get that far in the story, evidently. He saw it as, oh, it was a disaster. Look, it's not. The best thing, the most practical thing, is just to be Krishna conscious. And the child will get that, whatever they have to deal with in their life. They have individual path. They have some karma from previous lives has to be burnt off. So it always comes down to that. The most practical thing. Oh, but that's not practical. It's like with Prabhupada even. And this was like, way back when. I don't know, when was Prabhupada born? The 1800s something? When was Prabhupada born? I don't know the year of his birth. But, let's see, he was 80-something and 70. Yeah, 18-something, 1895, something like that. Way back then, in India, there was this thing going on between what was actually practical and what wasn't. Prabhupada talked about this a lot. He said that mostly, when he tried to preach in India before coming to the West, he said mostly they say, what will this Krishna do? We need something practical. We need engineering science. We need this science, that science. We need factories. We need to keep up with the world. This is practical. And not this Krishna, which is not practical anymore. So he couldn't even get one boy to be a student, to learn this bhakti, devotional service, yoga. Couldn't even get one boy. No one would give him their son. No, yes. So even Prabhupada, when he was a child, like 1900, whatever, his mother wanted him to go to study to be a barrister, a lawyer. Wanted him to go to England to learn how to be a lawyer because that's practical. His father said, no. Let him learn Mridanga. I want him to learn Mridanga. No England lawyer stuff. This is so contaminating. No, he learned to play Mridanga. So that was going on, has been going on for a very long time. What's practical and what isn't practical? The most practical thing is just to practice Krishna consciousness. What could be more practical? Oh, if I just do this other thing, then it will protect. If I need a how-to, what to. No, that's all. It's the Kali Yuga, So, for this problem of how to raise a child in this age, because they're contaminated by so many things, they come into contact. In previous ages, which not now, but before, what is it? A village. It takes a village to raise a child. Why? Because who will they play with as they're growing up? Who will they study with when they get their education? The other members of the village. And it is a controlled situation. The contamination can't get in very much. Or if it does, it's very obvious. Here's a demonic force, out it goes. That's your Kshatriya, the demonic. Get it out. But that's not now. It's not now. For the last 50 years, trying, make this village arrangement. Trying. It's not for this age. For this age is chant Hare Krishna, become as Krishna conscious as possible, and then the children will get that for whatever else it is and that when the parents do that, then they make good decisions. Where to send the child to school, how to guide what the child does, how to control the exposure to all the media and everything. So just give them a good, strong background. Then they can deal with it. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare. So you're looking for something practical. That's practical. Like Prabhupada's mother. No, it's not practical. You should go to England and learn to be a lawyer. That's practical. Father, no, that's not practical. That's a terrible idea. You should stay here, learn to play mridanga. That's practical. So there's this article that I'm reading. I wish it was still the one of the ones that got distributed widely, but it's come out of print, I guess, for mass distribution, is Who is Crazy? So we can put another article, another essay. What's practical? What's practical? Oh God. Krishna Chaitanya. So I think, I'm going to do more austerity here. Not the chanting thing, but more austerity by reading more. Chanting, yes, but I think 3 times a day, take the time out. In the morning is Krishna book, and midday will be Bhagavatam, and in the evening, before taking rest, Bhagavad Gita. So, it's morning, more or less, and it's time for Krishna book. Oh, but this isn't practical. You have so many things you have to do. This isn't practical. You're wasting time doing this. You have so many other things to do. This isn't practical. Hare Krishna. This is very practical. Okay. But you've already read Krishna book. Why do you keep reading the same book over and over again? What's the matter with you? Why don't you read something else? Or some other book that you haven't read yet. Maybe you'll learn something. Okay. Krishna. This is 10th Canto, Summary Study of Srimad Bhagavatam by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and there's a prayer for protection here in the beginning. It's from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Lord Chaitanya would pray this, sing this little, say, Krishna, 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 He. Krishna, 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 He. Krishna, 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 Rakshamam. Krishna, 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 Pahimam. Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rakshamam. Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Pahimam. It's a prayer for protection. And the Rama Raghava verse, line, is praying to Lord Ramachandra. Rama Raghava. It's not much referred to in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the form of Lord Ramachandra. But we do have the sadhus, the 6-armed form of Krishna with the flute. Ramachandra with the bow and arrow and the green arms, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the sannyas and the water pipe, 6-armed form. So he is very much in there, Rama Raghava. And the last line, Krishna Keshava, that refers to Krishna as the killer of the Keshi demon. So Keshi is the one who was the horse, came in, the Keshi demon, into Vrindavan forest and tried to attack by Krishna, and Krishna put his fist in his mouth. And felt like a hot iron rod to Keshi. And that finished Keshi off with his fist in his mouth. There you go, have some Krishna. Have some Krishna. Krishna. Wow. Krishna Chaitanya. So this is, I think it's 22, chapter 22, delivering the wives of the Brahmanas. These dealings with the wives of the Brahmanas is very similar to the dealings with the gopis. It's very similar. Now the gopis were the wives of the cowherd men, and the Brahmanas are the wives, these are the wives of the Brahmanas. So, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. 10 times he's going to do that. Hare Krishna, 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 Krishna. Thank you. All right. So as Krishna is speaking to them, and he said they've taken the food that they were preparing, because their husbands are doing these ritualistic ceremonies. They want to go to higher planets, and their mantras, and their with the fire, and because they want to go higher planets. They're not interested in Krishna and Balaram. They want to go to higher planets. And the wives, they're actually devotees of Krishna and Balaram. And they're doing the cooking for the sacrificial offerings. So the food is very nice because they're cooking very nicely. And the boys come and they ask, and the wives give the food that's meant for the sacrificial offerings, like what happened with Indra. Don't worship Indra, worship Govardhan Hill. Well, here also, no, don't use that food for the sacrificial. Take that food, give it to Krishna and the cowherd boys. So that's what they did. They put it in big pots. And you can imagine the husbands must have been very happy about that. So they went to where Krishna and Balaram were, and they brought all this wonderful food they've been cooking. My dear wives of the Brahmanas, Krishna said, you can now return to your homes. Engage yourselves in sacrificial activities and be engaged in the service of your husbands and household affairs, so that your husbands will be pleased with you. And the sacrifice which they have begun will be properly executed. After all, your husbands are householders, and without your help, how can they execute their prescribed duties? And Krishna said that to the gopis. Well, why did you come to the forest in the middle of the night? Just go home and do your duties. So the wives of the Brahmanas replied, Dear Lord, this sort of instruction does not befit you. Your eternal promise is that you will always protect your devotees, and now you must fulfill this promise. Anyone who comes and surrenders unto you never goes back to the conditioned life of material existence. We expect that you will now fulfill your promise. We have surrendered unto your lotus feet, which are covered by the tulasi leaves. So we have no more desire to return to the company of our so-called relatives, friends, society, and give up the shelter of your lotus feet. And what shall we do returning home? Our husbands, brothers, fathers, sons, mothers, and our friends do not expect to see us, because we have already left them all. Therefore, we have no shelter to return to. Please, therefore, do not ask us to return home, but arrange for our stay under your lotus feet so that we can eternally live under your protection. Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead replied, "My dear wives, rest assured, your husbands will not neglect you on your return, nor will your brothers, sons, or fathers refuse to accept you, because you are my pure devotees. And not only your relatives, but also people in general, as well as the demigods, will be satisfied with you." Krishna is situated as the super soul in everyone's heart. So, if someone becomes a pure devotee of Lord Krishna, he immediately becomes pleasing to everyone. The pure devotee of Lord Krishna is never inimical to anyone. A sane person cannot be an enemy of a pure devotee. Transcendental love for me does not depend upon bodily connection, Krishna said further, but anyone whose mind is always absorbed in me will surely very soon come to me for my eternal association. After being instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the wives again returned home to their respective husbands. Pleased to see their wives back home, the Brahmanas executed the performances of sacrifices by sitting together, as it is enjoined in the Shastras. According to Vedic principle, religious rituals must be executed by the husband and wife together. When the Brahmanas' wives returned, the sacrifice was duly and nicely executed. One of the Brahman's wives, however, who was forcibly checked from going to see Krishna, began to remember him as she heard of his bodily features. Completely absorbed in his thoughts, she gave up her material body, conditioned by the laws of nature. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Sri Govinda, the ever joyful personality of Godhead, revealed his transcendental pastimes, appearing just like an ordinary human being, and enjoyed the food offered by the wives of the Brahmanas. In this way, he attracted common persons to Krishna consciousness. He attracted to his words and beauty all the cows, cowherd boys, and damsels in Vrindavan. After the return of their wives from Krishna, the Brahmanas engaged in the performance of sacrifices began to regret their sinful activities in refusing food to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They could finally understand their mistake. Engaged in the performance of Vedic rituals, they had neglected the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who had appeared just like an ordinary human being and asked for some food. They began to condemn themselves after seeing the faith and devotion of their wives. They regretted very much that, although their wives were elevated to the platform of pure devotional service, they themselves could not understand even a little bit of how to love and offer transcendental loving service to the Supreme Soul. They began to talk among themselves. This is the famous to hell verse. To hell with our being born Brahmanas. To hell with our learning all Vedic literatures. To hell with our performing great sacrifices and observing all the rules and regulations. To hell with our family. To hell with our expert service in performing the rituals exactly to the description of the scriptures. To hell with it all! For we have not developed transcendental, loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond the speculation of the mind, body, and senses. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda.